Welcome back, guys. So in today's lesson, we're going to have a look at group 1 elements in more detail and looking at all the properties of those group 1 elements. Before we do that, let's go back to the periodic table and have a look at what we already know about our group 1 elements. So going right to the top. So we know that group 1 elements are all the elements in the column 1. So lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, and francium. And we also looked at in our previous videos at how the elements in group 1 have 1 electron on the outer shell. So just for example's sake, let me try to draw the atom for lithium, just so we can go through the process of how you know what it looks like. So like all atoms, it's going to have protons and neutrons in the nucleus. And then it's going to have 2 shells because it's in period 2. So the first shell is going to have 2 electrons. And then that second shell, which is the outer shell for lithium, is going to have 1 electron. And the only difference between the group 1 elements is that as you go down, the number of shells increases, but the outer shell is always going to have 1 electron. So sodium will have 3 shells. The first shell will have 2 electrons, the second shell will have 8 electrons, and the third shell, which is the outer shell, it's going to have 1 electron. So that is the first part recapped. One other thing that we know is if we draw our stepping line, which I'm going to draw really roughly on here, we know that all the elements on the left of that are metals, and group 1 is on the left of it, so we know that group 1 elements are metals. So that's what we know so far. Let's have a look at the rest of the new information and see what else we can find out about the properties. So we know that group 1 elements are metals. So they do have the metal properties, so they're shiny, they're good conductors of heat and electricity. But they are slightly different to other metals because they have lower melting points. So if you have a look at the melting points of sodium, lithium, sodium, potassium, and rubidium, which are in group 1, they're quite low compared to other metals like copper and platinum, which have quite high melting points. And the melting point decreases as you go down group 1. Don't get confused with the bottom 2 because they are not in group 1. The boiling point also decreases as we go down group 1. So boiling point and melting point decrease as you go down. So that is one of the properties. And looking at the chemical properties, group 1 elements are very reactive, especially with water. And if we were in school, maybe we could have done a practical looking at the reaction of group 1 elements with water, but for obvious reasons we can't do that now. But what I've done is in the description on this YouTube video, I've linked another video from a different school who have uploaded their experiment with group 1 elements with water, and it shows you just how vigorous those reactions are. And I would really recommend everyone having a look at that. It's just a 1-minute video. And it's quite exciting actually, because there's a bit of sparks, there's a bit of fire. So definitely recommend having a look at that. So what happens when they react with water? So again, using lithium as an example, if we have lithium and we have water, which is H2O, we get lithium hydroxide, and hydrogen gas. And in the video that I've linked, you can actually see the gases coming out when the reaction happens, because the hydrogen gas is produced. So the metals melt as they react with water to produce an alkaline solution. So the alkaline solution would make the universal indicator purple because it's got a pH of more than 7, if you remember that. And they produce metal hydroxides and your hydrogen gas. And as I said, they're quite vigorous, and as looking at the trend as you go down the group in terms of reactivity, as you go down group 1, the reactivity increases. And this is also really important to remember. If there's anything that you make a note of, it's this: reactivity increases as you go down. So in the experiment video, you'll see that there's, as you use elements that are further down, the reaction becomes more and more vigorous, and there's more sparks and more fire produced as you go down. Some of the reactions with like cesium, rubidium, we can't even do because they're so dangerous, because they produce so much fire and sparks, etc. So reactivity increases as you go down. So francium is going to be the most reactive, and lithium is going to be the least reactive out of all of them. So make a note of this, definitely, on your periodic table. And that's it for this lesson. That's all you need to know about group 1 elements. What I would say is some of you might find it difficult to remember this equation, so please take time to reflect what happens when lithium reacts with water. It's going to be exactly the same for all the other elements. So for example, if sodium reacts with water, we're going to get sodium hydroxide. And hydrogen as well. And it's exactly the same with all the elements. We will also always get the metal hydroxide and hydrogen. So make a note of that. But that is everything you need to know for this lesson. Stay tuned for group 7, which will be coming up next, and definitely watch the video that is linked below.